and on behalf of the board members of DAHA, as well as of the Bohemian Benevolent and Literary Association, I would like to welcome you to this afternoon's program entitled Hiawatha Melodrama. As is well known, Dvořák was inspired by Longfellow's epic poem Hiawatha, featuring a Native American hero. Dvořák incorporated Native American musical themes in his famed New World Symphony. Today's Hiawatha Melodrama will focus on this connection. Today's event is also introducing an exhibit of the original manuscript of the New World Symphony that will be open to the public for 5 days from November 16 to November 21st. The New World Symphony manuscript returns for the first time to New York City, where it was composed by Dvořák in 1892 to 1893. The permanent home of this manuscript is in Prague, and it is considered to be a national treasure. It is returning for a brief stay to New York City on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution. DAHA will be offering 3 programs related specifically to this exhibit. On November 18th at 6 p.m., Maestro Maurice Perez will explore Dvořák's influences on American composers, such as Ellington, such as Gershwin, and Copland. On November 19th, Barbara Hawes, the New York Philharmonic's archivist, and Maida Kala-Lidiger, a cultural historian and the secretary of the Dvořák American Heritage Association, will discuss highlights of Dvořák's residency in New York City from 1892 to 1895, when he was the director of the National Conservatory of Music in America. On November 20th, Professor Michael Beckerman will explore back stories related to the New World Symphony. For further information, please refer to our website, dvoraknyc.org. It will be an exciting week, so I hope that you will join us. Back to this afternoon, I would like to introduce Professor Michael Beckerman, who really doesn't need an introduction, as he has spoken here and performed here many times over the past several years. He is a professor of music at NYU. He is an expert and a scholar on Central European music, specifically on Dvořák. He has written a book called Dvořák New Worlds. And he also writes for the New York Times, as well as he's often invited as a commentator to Lincoln Center. So please welcome Michael Beckerman, who has conceived and organized this afternoon's program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I think it was probably about 20 years ago when Joe Horowitz and I first started hatching plans that have recently come to fruition in this Naxos recording, the CD recording of the Hiawatha Melodrama, which will be available for your perusal after the show. And we've been thinking about these issues along with other scholars and practitioners and performers for quite a long time. So we wanted to structure an event that brought some of the main issues to light. I suppose the main issue at the bottom of it all, which I don't think we'll answer at this particular event, is what's exactly the relationship between music, particularly instrumental music, and the rest of the world? How do they interact? Who says so? How do you prove it? What happens when composers are taken with or even obsessed by literary texts and compose works saying that they were influenced by these? How do we then take those works? What is the relationship between them? Do we feel as if we are somehow tainting the abstract music if we associate it with a story? Do we feel more comfortable that things like stories simply provide one level of insight? We're going to be exploring those issues today, but we're going to be exploring them not by means of a lot of discussion, although there will be some, but with lots of images of different kinds. We're going to begin by imagining some things about the relationship between music and the rest of the world. We're going to delve into a little bit Dvořák's Native American legacy. Of course, Dvořák famously was profoundly influenced by African American song. He believed in some ways that no fit American music could be without African American music at its core. And Native American music was important to him too, although he didn't speak about it quite as much. But he was, as we'll suggest, passionately interested in the Song of Hiawatha and Minnehaha as well. But the idea that Dvořák might even have speaking associated with music goes back to something else, and that's the third part of our particular afternoon, and that's the Czech melodrama tradition, the tradition of combining text, spoken text, with music. And then we'll close by returning to this particular melodrama, which has been created by myself, but especially by Joseph Horowitz and his various collaborators, including Kevin Deas, whose voice you'll hear, and Angel, the conductor, who've done a marvelous job, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But for now, let me introduce Joseph Horowitz. Joseph Horowitz is a noted cultural critic. As I said, he and I have been studying and talking and debating these issues for quite some time, and he's going to introduce the next part of the program. Joe, please.
I'm going to speak for about a minute. How many of you know the Larghetto from the Dvořák violin sonatina? Oh, very few. Okay, well, we're going to hear it, but it's going to be played flute and piano rather than violin and piano, and I'm going to ask you to talk about it and tell me what you hear, and then I'm going to tell you some of the things we know were in Dvořák's head when he composed it. So please welcome Kaori Fuji, our flutist, and Mike Beckerman, our pianist. This is a piece that lasts about 4 minutes, and I'm going to ask you to talk about it. Here are our performers. impressions. They could be musical impressions, or they could actually be physical impressions as to what this music might be about. And then I'll tell you what was in Dvořák's head. Yeah, in the back of the room.
Yeah, I got a plaintive feeling of longing. Longing for something, and then when the melody quickened a little, it was that pleasantry of what was being lost to me that was reflective, and that plaintiveness that I first identified with the music, and that it passed out into at the end of it.
Thank you. Did everybody hear that? It's a little scenario for the piece. There was a hand over here. Yes? No? There's a hand. Yeah.
I can't talk about scales and etc. But I had at the beginning a feeling of music that was clearly not Czech, that was from somewhere else, maybe native.
Yeah.
And then it somehow fused and got into melodies that I recognized as influenced by imperceptible Czech and Moravian things. The last few bars went back to maybe the native music.
Can you hear me if I don't use that? I hope so. Did anybody hear water in this piece?
Yes.
Okay, nobody said that, but everybody heard water.
Yes.
Okay? So why is there water in this piece? I'm going to tell you the things that we know about this piece thanks to Mike. And Mike, you tell me if I get anything wrong, okay? So, where's the water? Everybody heard the water. So, what I know from Mike is that when Dvořák went to Minnehaha Falls, he wrote that theme on his shirt cuff. Now, why did he go to Minnehaha Falls? Because he'd already read the Song of Hiawatha in Czech, and Hiawatha's wife is named Minnehaha. Why is she named Minnehaha? Because she's named after Minnehaha Falls. Why is she named after Minnehaha Falls? Because her father, the arrow maker, observed that his daughter was moody. And her mood would alternate between sunshine and shade, or shadow. Just like the play Sunlight on Minnehaha Falls, which is not Niagara Falls. So this piece, which Fritz Kreisler used to play as an encore called Indian Lament, turns out to be a kind of cameo of Minnehaha. And not only do you hear the waterfall, but this alternation of mood takes the form of an alternation of modes. So it starts at G minor. You already heard the G major of the waterfall in the second theme. It's in B flat major, so this constant alternation between major and minor is partly a portrait of Minnehaha. As far as the first tune, which somebody said didn't sound Czech, once you listen to enough of Dvořák in America, you begin to recognize something that has to do with Indians. Here's another such example. What does that have to do with Indians? Well, it's not an attempt to describe what Indians look like or sound like. It's an idea of Indians, and it's sad. Because the plight of the Native American is sad. And then typically his modal and this kind of an open fifth drone accompaniment is also typical. So this, I agree with Mike when he says that the repeated notes and other characteristics of this theme evoke Indians as experienced by Dvořák. Also, there's pain in this music, like this thing at the end with the tremolos where it's going. You feel these little sforzatos. And there should be pain because Minnehaha dies. She dies very young in winter during a famine. The melodrama. Melodrama means spoken word and music. Mike and I have concocted two versions of the Hiawatha Melodrama. You'll hear more about this and it will confuse you. But there was an early version, 9 minutes long, that's been widely performed, and a new version, 35 minutes long, which has been premiered and recorded on Knoxville so you can hear it. And we're going to talk now about this 35-minute concoction, this Hiawatha Melodrama, in which the story of Hiawatha is accompanied by an orchestra playing music derived from Dvořák and an actor reading verbatim from Longfellow, and we're going to talk about various movements in the melodrama, and I'm going to go first and talk about Hiawatha's wooing. So, if you're telling the story of Hiawatha, you have to tell the story about the wooing of Minnehaha. And obviously, if I'm going to create music for that, the first place I will go is the Larghetto from the violin sonatina, not the New World Symphony, but the Larghetto, because I understand that to be a portrait of Minnehaha. P.S. Is this program music? No. It's music where we happen to know what was in the composer's head, what inspired the music. Dvořák did not present this as a programmatic vignette the way he presented a tone poem like the Wood Dove or the Golden Spinning Wheel as a representation of a story. But we have this information. Dvořák always had ideas in his head. He almost never told us what they were, but in the case of these American works, he told us more than he normally would have, and we know it was in his head. When he composed the New World Symphony, and also we can tell that he was thinking Minnehaha. So I'm going to play for you, or somebody.
Let me just add one thing quickly.
Please,
one of the reasons we sort of know that particularly that middle water theme is related to Minnehaha is because you'll hear more about this later, but Dvořák tried for quite some time to write an opera based on Hiawatha. And he never completed it, but we have the sketches. So the theme from the sonatina at the Minnehaha Falls is, and his theme in his opera sketches marked Minnehaha as. So, you know, he's sort of labeled the theme that he uses in the waterfall movement.
So if you're me and you've got this in your hands, and you're going to try and create a melodrama out of Hiawatha's wooing, what you're going to do is go to the Larghetto. I actually begin with a solo flute off stage. It's an alto flute. And then I start not with the first theme, which is in the minor, but with the second theme, which is in the major. So I'm taking the music you just heard and fiddling with it, changing the parts around. Obviously, when we get to the waterfall, you'll hear the part that represents the waterfall. So is there somebody?
Yes, and you should have texts. Everybody has a text. And this will be Hiawatha's wooing. So if we could have the first example.
We're not going to go all the way through, but
right,
you get the idea.
As unto the bow the cord is, so unto the man is woman. Though she bans him, she obeys him. Though she draws him, yet she follows. Thus the youthful Hiawatha sat within himself and pondered. Much perplexed by various feelings. Listless, longing, hoping, feeling, dreaming still of Minnehaha, of the lovely, laughing water. There the ancient arrow maker made his arrowheads of sandstone. With him dwelt his dark-eyed daughter, wayward as the Minnehaha, with her moods of shade and sunshine. Eyes that smiled and frowned alternate, tresses flowing like the water, and as musical a laughter. And he named her from the river, from the waterfall. He named her Minnehaha, laughing water.
So we're going to switch now to the slaying of Kalpakiwis, the penultimate movement of the melodrama, and you'll experience a different method, Mike's method. Mike is taking from Dvořák verbatim. He's also, I would say, making a musicological argument, which I'm not making, which is this is more or less exactly what is going on in the music. But he'll make a more refined statement of this in a moment. So he's not taking music apart and putting it back together like I am. He's taking a chunk of Dvořák and a chunk of Longfellow, and we happen to have a visual version of this particular movement, which we'll share with you. But I'd like Mike to start by telling us why Kevin sings. You want to bring this up now? And not only speaks in the slaying of Kalpakiwis.
Does he sing in the slaying?
Yeah, that's where he gets to the water.
That's not the slaying. Oh, the first part, of course. Okay, now we're on the same movement. Yeah.